There's a terrifying asteroid heading for Earth which will destroy all life as we know it. Luckily, Bruce Willis is here to save the day in Michael Bay's Armageddon, a late 90s disaster movie in which a team of expert drillers led by Harry, played by Willis, are given 11 days to be trained by NASA so they can become astronauts and travel to the asteroid and destroy it with a nuclear bomb. His team also includes AJ, played by Ben Affleck, who is in a relationship with Grace, played by Liv Tyler, who is also Harry's daughter, of which he isn't too pleased with, because Armageddon is also a love story. Be that a love story full of Michael Bay isms, which tries to make animal crackers sexy. In this 1998 action science fiction movie, which has more ham and cheese than an all-you-can-eat ham and cheese buffet, which despite getting torn apart by critics, we all went and saw it anyway. I hope that everyone had a happy festive season, and I ate way too much, and now it feels like I'm carrying an asteroid with me. So for that very reason, today we are going to look into 10 things that you didn't know about Armageddon. So let's check it out. Number 10. The Deep Impact Retaliation. The year 1998 was definitely the year of Earth-destroying asteroids, as there was actually two big Hollywood movies that explored the premise of an asteroid hitting Earth. One was Armageddon, of course, and the other was Deep Impact, the Steven Spielberg-produced look into what would happen when an asteroid is on a collision course with Earth. Unlike Armageddon though, Deep Impact didn't have a Hollywood fairy tale ending, and tried to tackle the issue more seriously and realistically. According to Wikipedia, one of Deep Impact's writers, Bruce Joe Rubin, claims that when he met up with a Disney production president for lunch, he spoke of his Deep Impact script, where the Disney president took notes, and decided to take this idea to Disney for them to make their own version of an asteroid disaster movie, which led to the creation of Armageddon. So if that's true, Armageddon was literally Disney trying to outdo Spielberg and DreamWorks. Number 9. Armageddon had an army of writers. So if you think the end of the world is a scary concept, that's nothing compared to the writing process of Armageddon, of which had a staggering 9 writers coming on board to work on the Armageddon script. Yeah, 9. One of whom was J.J. Abrams. The project was a Touchstone Pictures one, which was a sub-company of Disney, with Jerry Bruckheimer producing the movie, as Bruckheimer had produced several big action movies of the 80s and 90s, including Beverly Hills Cop, Top Gun, Bad Boys, The Rock, and Con Air. And of course the directing duties were given to the director who has a love of blowing shit up, Michael Bay. Armageddon was actually his third theatrical movie, after the as-mentioned Bad Boys and The Rock, and it was made shortly before his love of boobs, bums and guns really took hold in the Transformers movies. I think that Michael Bay seems to be one of those directors that people either love or hate. I mean, heck, British film critic Mark Kermode once described him as the cinematic antichrist. Number 8. Titanic was a major influence for Armageddon. So yeah, a huge portion of Armageddon's running time isn't just devoted to explosions and Michael Bay's oddball jokes, but also the romantic element between the AJ and Grace characters, played by Ben Affleck and Liv Tyler. In fact, this young couple is a huge focus in the movie. After all, this is the only time in movie history where animal crackers are seen to be erotic. Yep, I guess there's nothing more romantic than a young hero jetting out into the unknown to save the world for the woman he loves. However, yeah, I say that word a lot, don't I? In the original script, there was no romantic subplot. The romance element of Armageddon was simply added later on, because at the time the script was being written by its many scriptwriters, Titanic came out, which was a massive hit, and of course was a disaster movie with a huge romantic element. So the production probably thought to themselves, hey, this romance in Titanic is doing very well. So boom, we have to do this and make our own disaster movie romance. Which is how the romantic side of the movie came to be. In fact, this was probably a really late addition, as the romance scenes between Affleck and Tyler were filmed quite late into the shoot. In fact, before all the romance, a great deal of the movie was going to focus on the NASA executive Furman, played by Billy Bob Thornton. But a huge chunk of his scenes were cut out in order to make way for the movie's romance. Number 7. Bruce Willis was kind of forced into the movie. Bruce Willis is the lead star of Armageddon, a movie with a huge ensemble of actors, where he plays Harry Stamper, and ends up being humanity's last hope, where he would go on to sacrifice himself and save the world. Willis was cast in the movie because he had legal troubles with Disney at the time. You see, in 1997, Bruce Willis was making a romantic comedy with Disney called Broadway Brawler, where Willis was to play an ice hockey player. However, after 20 days of shooting, the production had completely collapsed due to difficulties of working with Willis and his general on-set behaviour. But this is supposedly, remember, I wasn't there. So a big budgeted movie shutting down during its shoot is never a good thing, and most of the blame was put on Willis. So as compensation, Willis signed a 3-movie deal with Disney, which would see him go on to star in Armageddon, The Sixth Sense, and a comedy movie called The Kid. Yeah, remember that movie? The one where Bruce Willis meets a younger version of himself? Yeah. Oh, and a part of his contract to star in these movies was that he was to receive a pay cut, lower than his usual fee. But considering what smash hits both The Sixth Sense and Armageddon would be, I don't think it was really that much of an issue for him. And as for that scene where the Harry character does his tearful farewell to his daughter Grace, Willis was able to get emotional for that scene, as while that scene was being filmed, he was looking at pictures of his real-life daughters. Number 6. Michael Bay hated Ben Affleck's teeth. Ben Affleck may be known as Batman in recent years, where he takes on crime. It seems that in the late 90s he had to take on bad teeth. Okay, they weren't bad, but when it came time to start filming, Michael Bay just wasn't feeling it with the actor's teeth. He wanted the AJ character to look heroic, with large, pearly white teeth. But Bay felt that it looked like Affleck had really little tiny baby teeth. So after consulting with producer Jerry Bruckheimer, it was decided to pay for Ben to visit a top-notch Hollywood dentist and have him create a new set of pearly white teeth for Affleck. This involved Affleck having to sit in the dentist's chair for 8 hours a day for a full week, and the fee for Affleck's sparkling new teeth came to $20,000. Affleck's chompers weren't the only issue that the actor had with Bay, as thanks to the Honest Trailers video that came out about Armageddon a few years ago, it was pointed out that Affleck questioned Bay about the story, and asked him wouldn't it make more sense to teach astronauts to be drillers than drillers to be astronauts. Where Bay then told him to shut the F up. But yeah, you've probably already seen that video. Number 5. Armageddon was actually filmed at NASA. The on-location filming for Armageddon took place in many parts of America, including New York, California, and Texas. However, what's impressive about the filming locations for Armageddon is that parts of the movie were actually filmed in restricted parts of the NASA space facility. Supposedly, the production were able to get their foot in the door because NASA liked how patriotic the script was, and the company was also a fan of the movie Top Gun, which was also produced by Armageddon producer Jerry Bruckheimer, as mentioned. And one Need for Speed later, Armageddon actually filmed at the location, giving audiences an insight into some of the most private areas of NASA. The shuttle launches seen in Armageddon were also real, as the production were granted permission to place 16 cameras around the location in order to capture the takeoff. Now there's something of an urban legend that NASA shows Armageddon as part of a management training program, where the upcoming managers are to point out the scientific errors in the movie. However, this might just be the stuff of fiction, as a NASA employee supposedly recently shrugged off that the story is just a mere internet myth. In case you were wondering, there are a staggering 168 scientific inaccuracies in Armageddon. Number 4. Michael Bay isn't too pleased with the final film. Yep, believe it or not, but Michael Bay isn't a fan of his golden disaster movie opus. And no, it's not because there weren't enough explosions, but rather the rushed manner that he had to film the movie, as he was only given 16 weeks to shoot Armageddon. Bay said in an interview that the third act in particular is something that he would redo if he could, as he felt that at that stage the studio had completely taken over the film. To make matters worse, the special effects supervisor had a nervous breakdown, to which Bay had to be in charge of the effects himself, and even supposedly contacted James Cameron for advice. In addition to that, 2 months before the movie's release, new additional scenes had to be filmed to be used in Armageddon's TV trailers, in order to convince people that this movie isn't Deep Impact, but an entirely different disaster movie involving an asteroid. These additional marketing shots cost the production a further $3 million, not to mention a further $2.6 million to advertise Armageddon at the 1998 Super Bowl. Number 3. Then there's that song that was everywhere. Oh boy, now it's time to talk about the Aerosmith song, I Don't Want to Miss a Thing, which was a tie-in song for Armageddon, which I suppose makes sense as Aerosmith's frontman Steve Tyler is the father to Liv Tyler, who starred in the movie as Grace. And wow! Just wow! If you were around in 1998, then you'll probably remember that this song was just everywhere. You couldn't go anywhere without hearing Steve Tyler screaming about how he doesn't want to close his eyes and fall asleep, as this song was huge. It reached number 1 in the American charts, as well as reaching number 1 in other countries like Ireland, Norway, Italy, Germany, Greece, and Australia, and sold over 1 million copies in the UK. Yeah, I Don't Want to Miss a Thing was to 1998 what Celine Dion's My Heart Will Go On was to 1997. In fact, the person who wrote I Don't Want to Miss a Thing, Diane Warren, had originally envisioned Celine Dion to sing I Don't Want to Miss a Thing. And yeah, it definitely has that lovey-dovey, epic ballad sound that My Heart Will Go On has. Warren actually came up with I Don't Want to Miss a Thing when watching a TV interview with James Brolin and Barbra Streisand, where Brolin talks about how much he misses Streisand while they are sleeping, which prompted Warren to come up with the sentence, I don't want to miss a thing. Aerosmith would actually go on to record 4 songs for Armageddon, but it's I Don't Want to Miss a Thing that everyone remembers and was beaten over the head with. And no, I'm not putting it down, as it's actually a pretty epic song. It's just that there was no escaping it. Number 2, the cast gets snarky. Michael Bay isn't the only one who has a slight trepidation when looking back upon Armageddon. Cut to 9 years later in 2007 when Willis was promoting Die Hard 4, he said that he didn't enjoy working with director Michael Bay, and further expressed that he'll never work with him again. Upon hearing this, Bay retaliated by saying that he actually really liked working with Willis, and that the two had recently caught up and discussed working on another project together, so who knows. Apparently, Liv Tyler was offered the role of Grace twice and turned down the part, until she finally accepted. Michael Duncan Clark, who plays the character Bear, was nearly fired, because during the movie's shoot he started to feel insecure, which affected his performance, where according to IMDb, he was told to step up or risk being replaced. Actor Billy Bob Thornton often makes jokes about the movie and claims that he was in it for the money, but in later years would claim that Armageddon isn't that bad. Steve Buscemi claims that he starred in the movie as he wanted a big house, and Owen Wilson said wow. Even Ben Affleck has supposedly disowned Armageddon and often makes jokes about it, aka the Armageddon commentary. Number 1. The critics told us not to watch Armageddon, but we all went and watched it anyway. Oh boy, it was war when Armageddon came out, as the critics hated it. It was criticised for its fast-paced editing and for being generally considered a dumb, unintelligent movie. Roger Ebert in particular hated this movie so much, he announced it to be his worst movie of 1998. Yeah, the critics really weren't ready to sit back and see any escapist fun with Armageddon. They hated it. In fact, despite many of the movie's inaccuracies, some of the criticisms were unjust, as one thing that seemed to really piss off some critics was a line that the asteroid was the same size as Texas, with the premise being described as ridiculous. But the National Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C. has an exhibit which explains that millions of years ago an asteroid did hit Earth which was in fact the size of Texas. So yeah, take that one, critics. Despite the anger and outrage from the critics, audiences didn't listen and went and saw it, and Armageddon would go on to make over $553 million on a budget of $140 million, making it the second highest grossing movie of 1998 behind Saving Private Ryan. So yeah, whether you like the movie or hate it, for its day, Armageddon was big business. In fact, when released on home media, it beat Pretty Woman as Disney's most sold home video that isn't an animated feature. And what's really baffling is Armageddon was given a Criterion Collection release. Yeah, Armageddon. Now, the Criterion Collection is usually reserved for highly praised art house movies, so it's fascinating that Armageddon actually got a Criterion release. I think these days Armageddon is a movie that some people look back on and make jokes about, as it is a product of its time. Its upbeat, corny cheesiness totally clashes with today's dark and pessimistic sensibilities. And I agree that Armageddon is no high art masterpiece, but I think it's a very well made movie, and if you switch your brain off for a couple of hours, then you'll probably find that it actually is a lot of fun. Without a doubt, Armageddon is the ultimate guilty pleasure movie. It's a movie that's easy to pick on, but it's also easy to enjoy. If there are people who hate this movie, then yeah, I get that. But if there are people who love it and just simply see it as a state-of-the-art popcorn movie, then yeah, I get that too. On the account that I find this movie to be really divisive. You're either totally on board with it and love it, or you just can't get on board with all the ham and cheese and absolutely loathe it. Anyway, I'm Minty, and wow, I just talked about a Michael Bay movie. Yep, it was finally going to happen sooner or later. I'm just glad nothing blew up. Damn it!